One. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Smart Money Circle. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is Lior Tal, who's the CEO of Cyngn, ticker symbol CYN, that does something very interesting. They automate a lot of the things that we do in the industry, in the industrial world, which I'll let Lior talk about. But Lior, thank you so much for coming to on the show.
Adam, good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, Lior, I would like to ask, can you tell us a little about your journey and how you got to where you are today, please?
Yes, of course. So I've been building these technology companies for the last 24 years or so across different industries, from communication at the beginning, messaging, then as telecom was booming, we had solutions at telecoms, even touched defense at some point. And in the past several years, focused really on artificial intelligence and industrial automation through the journey with Cyngn.
Nice. And let's talk about, you became CEO, you're chairman as well. Tell us a little about the company. So you're well-versed, you know about the company. Tell us about what the company does and some of the competitive advantages, please.
Of course. It was 2016. I was spending about 5.5 years at Facebook at that point. I joined Facebook pretty early, before they even had a mobile product line, and when it was still a desktop company, when we sold her my previous company, Snap2. And I think those years at Facebook really coincided with the explosion of social and mobile around the world. And it was amazing to see what impact the product can have on people's lives. And that's really something that when I was looking at what to do post-Facebook, I was really looking at what are the opportunities to make a real dent in the world, which products can really change lives and which can create significant value. The one thing that's unique about Cyngn, if you think about our journey from 2016 building autonomous driving for the industrial world, is that while everyone else was looking at the open roads, at robotaxis and trucking, we identified that there's a huge underserved opportunity with industrial vehicles. And that's pretty much across all industries. It's from logistics and warehouses, mining, seaports, airports. If you bucket all of these different industries, what really moves them is their fleet. This is the backbone of moving heavier things faster than human can carry by themselves. But there's a huge dependence on human labor to drive these vehicles and to operate them. And usually they would work at 2 shifts, sometimes even 3 shifts per vehicle to keep a 24/7 operation. And at that point, it was towards the end of 2016, we decided to reach out to the market and talk to companies like UPS and DHL and even the DoD and Caterpillar, like everyone that either had a large fleet or was an OEM serving customers with large fleets, and asked them, if you could automate anything in that operation, where would you start? What's your alternative? And started collecting all that input and created a product requirement document that covers, let's say, 80% of all those needs in the middle. And then spend the next several years developing a self-driving, artificial intelligence-based software system that can be put on practically any industrial vehicle, and then replace the operator in that vehicle. You can think about it a little bit like ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a language engine. That's the platform, and then you can develop applications for marketing, for healthcare, for legal, for pretty much anything that is based on legal. DriveMod, which is our AI engine for driving, is that equivalent for vehicle operation application. So this is sort of where I think timing played a very significant role, where the cost of labor was always a factor and safety was always a factor. But what the pandemic, I think, really showed people is that labor shortage, employee retention are even stronger a driver to adopt automation and adopt new technologies across all these industries. And you think about the shutdowns of facilities during COVID, the disruption to supply chain, automation would have prevented all of that, practically all of that, right? And this is where I think the timing was excellent. We were emerging out of the R&D phase around 2021 after long years and tens of millions of dollars of investment, and then decided to take the company public to start the next phase of the journey of commercializing it. and getting it to be self-sustained.
I love it. So what you're saying is you've noticed there was an opportunity even before COVID was very clear that there's a shortage of labor and all that fun stuff. So you developed autonomous driving, but for industrial vehicles, not so much on the road where everyone else is looking. You look somewhere else and you realize it's a massive TAM, total addressable market, and there's a real value you could provide to the marketplace if you can help these companies solve that problem. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly the way to look at it. The one thing that we did that I think was unique even at that point is we harnessed all the billions of dollars that went into developing the road applications, and that's everything from the silicon and the chips to the software foundation to the sensors like lidars, talent, university courses, like everything was diverted to try to solve that very big, very long tail problem of driving on the road. We took these assets that other companies invested a lot of money in, and we repurposed it to a much smaller, very valuable, but a much smaller problem, much more solvable, that allows us to take it all the way across the line and really replace the operators and really start commercializing it. Now, the way we built our system is designed like a robotaxi. We drove SUVs on the roads in California. We had shuttle buses at Loblaws campus up in Canada. The system can drive on the open road, but between being able to drive in such a complicated and fast environment and actually, completing that product to commercial readiness and scalable state, it's going to take a lot of years. So one day we might end up deciding to inch towards that and start taking those applications. But at the moment, there is so much opportunity inside large warehouses, on private grounds, even in off-road heavy industry applications, that we're going to try to harvest all that value and provide that impact long before we think about other bigger problems.
No, I love that. And then you mentioned that Drive Mod or MOD, Drive Mod is your version of ChatGPT. Is that something that's internal, or is that something that's available for others to license or pay for as well, as far as growth?
At the moment, it's internal. The way our product is built is on three pillars. The first one is Drive Mode. That's the self-driving engine. That's the core of the technology. We issued the press release this morning about another family of patents that were granted. And it really is very flexible. It allows us to work on different applications with different vehicles. The way our team develops applications using Drive Mode for these industries is what we call the Evolve, Cyngn Evolve framework, which is everything from the data pipeline to get everything that's coming from our fleets. It's very similar to how Tesla would know everything that's coming from all these vehicles. Yep. We have a simulation framework that allows us to move fast, develop improvements, fix problems, and then push them back, with the press of the button back to the fleet. And all the tools that our internal team needs to take advantage of Drive Mode. And then there's a third pillar, which is Cyngn Insight, the fleet management, teleoperation, the analytics, everything a customer needs in order to manage their fleet, observe it, take advantage of the actionable insights that come from the fact that they have, suites of sensors now roaming around the facility. Evolve at the moment is an internal SDK. Over time, we can decide to open it up when it matures a little bit, and then allow other companies to take advantage of it and develop their own application. But in general, that's the direction.
I love that. And that's a clear path to prosperity, because as you continue to implement more and more of your solutions into warehouses across the world, not just in one area of the world, but across the whole world, I'm assuming the revenues just skyrocket, eventually get to profitability, and then so on and so forth, and dominate the space. So that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about risk. I'll shift the conversation a little bit more broader now. What are some mistakes you see people make with respect to risk management, and how do you handle risk?
I think the first one is very obvious if you look at self-driving, autonomous driving in general. It has a very deep and very long research and development valley, right? And a lot of these companies, and you can look at some of the companies that went under or got acquired, they were founded by researchers, some of the top universities, and they took on solving a very big problem. And, that became a little bit of their war in the trenches to figure out, give me a second. a little bit how to solve the next problem and develop something new and apply patents. And at some point, a lot of these companies really lost track of the fact that at the foundation of this, there is a customer that has a problem. There's an opportunity to improve something. The technology is a means to that end. It can be something you develop in-house. It can be something you purchase and integrate, the buy versus build question. But the objective is always keep the eye on the North Star on, am I building a product that solves someone's problem, makes an impact, is commercially viable, and can be profitable? And I think this is one thing that we navigated very successfully throughout these years. I think we're getting close to about $100 million invested in developing this technology. But this is compared to companies that put billions and billions of dollars into self-driving, especially in the trucking industry, and really have not made any significant progress towards getting it on the path to commercialization. Right. The second part is, of course, by the nature of this being a company, right? Initially a private company, and now a public company, is making sure that there's adequate funding, making sure that the spend is in line with the projected financing and the timeline for the revenues. And again, this is something that our CFO, Don Alvarez, and myself and the team, we're very diligent about that. And a lot of what happened during the last 2-3 years during the pandemic, you saw companies assuming the momentum of the pre-pandemic is going to be sustained and really hired and offered very significant compensation packages, and then lost momentum when the pandemic hit, and then sustained and got to a place where they overhired, they overspent, they got over-leveraged. We work just issues of warning. We're thinking about it differently. We think that the team we have now, the core team for developing it, is enough for what we need. And the growth of the company, the growth of the expenses is going to be a function of commercial traction. So more customers, more vehicles, more deployment, more licenses would justify more people to support those sales, those customers. And over time, ask the question, do we want to develop more things? Do we want to build a bigger core team of R&D? But at the moment, if you look at sort of our recent few financials, we're sort of pretty steady with that spend and really keeping an eye on it.
Love it. Okay, let's talk about some timeless lessons. What are some timeless lessons you've learned along the way that you'd like to share with the audience?
I'd say the one thing that I probably learned at Facebook and took with me, and this is something that I really apply to everything, including life, is the focus on impact. And I used to have a presentation I used when I onboarded new team members, back at Facebook and even here, and it shows a rocking horse. And a rocking horse is an example of movement, of motion that is not movement, right? So you can put a lot of effort and you can put a lot of money and people can spend a lot of time. It doesn't mean something is moving forward, right? I think the notion of impact is a combination of effort, success, and a need that come together. And I think this is what drives us. This is what drives how we allocate resources, how we do the performance reviews, how we judge ourselves, in front of the board. We had a plan. The plan worked or didn't work according to how it was designed, but did it move the metrics that we wanted, right? In order for you to know impact, you need to be data-driven. You need to also be able to measure the important KPIs. And that's another, I think, very important foundation of my management style. Anything that can be measured should be measured. And anything that can be displayed using data, data wins arguments, right? And if the data shows that whatever you're aiming for is on track or not on track, it allows you on the way there to make adjustment, to correct and improve and make changes. And it's so much stronger than just anecdotal opinions and input around it. So I'd say that's probably the number one advice I give people is think about that impact idea as your North Star, and always, keep the eyes, raise the eyes back up and look, am I heading towards that star or not?
I love that rocking horse. And now that is so powerful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, mistakes. What are some timeless mistakes you've seen people make and how do you avoid them?
This is a mistake that I think I've seen that over and over with startup companies, coming from Israel, from the startup nation. You see a lot of very smart people with great ideas. The difference between companies that were built in Israel and companies that are here in California, in the US, is sometimes the exposure to the market. If you sit in California, you develop the company here, or even sit in New York, you are in the market. You are next to the market, you're next to the money, and you're next to the customers.
Right.
So with a very short hop, you can see what the customer thinks and needs, what their alternatives are, and so forth. Israel is more of an exporter of technology and knowledge, which means there's a gap between the development of a product or a solution to where it's going to be used. And a common mistake is people like to build platforms, right? You build a platform that gives you a lot of flexibility. That platform, similar to ChatGPT or Drive Mod or many other things that people built along the way, is a capability. That capability allows you to then create a lot of value. But a lot of companies fail in identifying the application on top of that platform that actually crosses that line to make an impact on the customer side, right? So the ability to do a lot, but eventually not being able to do any one thing very well, I think is probably the downfall of a lot of teams and a lot of companies. We tried when we were developing Drive Mod to always have a North Star lighthouse type of application. We started with street vehicles so we can get the high rate and high frequency and high speed of interactions. Then we started working in Southeast Asia in a container port, moving things around a container port. So that was a problem that customer need to move things in an automated environment. We then moved to Canada to completely different weather environment to build shuttle buses for a retailer, right? So really thinking about, what still misses from that platform, but what is an application that pulls it forward. And over time, we started honing down on what we think is the most valuable probably need for the upcoming years, which is material handling. Even more so focus on material handling indoors, large facilities, manufacturing, logistics, 3PL. And once you have that focus, then everything becomes very clear to the product team and to the business team on what is that workflow that we're trying to replace, what are the environmental conditions, and so forth. So I'd say probably this is one of the bigger problems I've seen happen. And we sinned with it a little bit with the Drive Mod, but we did it sort of knowingly that we have that lighthouse application keeping us honest.
Yeah, we love that. Jack of all trades and master of none, where they don't master anything and they've got a platform and all these shiny objects, but there's no North Star, to use your language. I love that. So let's talk about what makes a great leader and what are some lessons you learned about leadership that you'd like to share with the audience?
I don't know. I hope one day I will become one. So we'll see how that happens. But I would say that if you really think about my role at the company, there's an external facing role, there's an internal facing role. The external one is straightforward, right? It's the representation of a company, engagement with the market and the customers and so forth, right? My internal role is more like the water between the pebbles, right? I fill the gaps that other with well-defined roles sometimes don't pick up and run with. So a lot of it has to do with ensuring things happen well. Is communication streamlined? Is decision making empowered? Are people able to take decisions knowing they might fail? So a lot of it is really making sure that the machine is lubricated, it's well-tuned, it's in sync, and it's moving forward. And I remember this is one of my experiences at Facebook when we had what's called a ZAC review, when you took a product roadmap to Mark for review, and you had a lot of smart people sitting in a room and presenting the roadmap to Mark. And very often Mark would not know more about the specific product or the specific feature than the people presenting it. Like he knew a lot, but there's a lot of details, a lot of smart people there. And I was always very impressed in how he asked the questions to make sure that they covered all the bases to reach that decision. Did you think about this? Did you talk to that? Did you measure this? Do you have the result for that? What do you think about that option? And if all these bases were covered, then he had confidence that the people that he hired to do these difficult jobs, are doing them well and can be trusted sort of to do that. I think part of it is being able to be decisive. Right? You need to make decisions sometimes that others are not confident taking because of lack of information, because of conflicting alternative, because of risk. So I think that's probably something that you cannot have an indecisive leader, because that's a problem for the entire pyramid. But um, it's also very much about the people. Can you hire great people? Can you retain them? Can you grow them? The people you hire push you up instead of being afraid of the people you hire being a risk and they just hire mediocre people? So there's a lot of these advices that come from running organizations and operations. Knowing the customer, I think, is foundational. Being the voice of the market inside sometimes when people get a little lost in the day-to-day work. But it's amazing. I love this work. I think it's very fulfilling.
That's fantastic. Let's talk about adversity or obstacles. How do you handle, or what are some obstacles you've encountered? How do you handle adversity, et cetera, please?
In other cases, in other companies I had, competition was an issue that accompanied the journey of the company. Here, it's very interesting in artificial intelligence in general, in self-driving, and specifically in industrial automation. There is so much space between companies, and the penetration of the product is so low that competition is actually a positive driver. We talked to McKinsey a couple of months ago, and one of the things that they brought up is companies that adopted automation, robotic automation solutions, are 92% likely to buy another one. So actually, you want that catalyst. You want people to be aware of it, to not be afraid of it, to adopt it, to understand the impact, the value it makes. So this is a classic one that it doesn't really play a big role yet. Of course, you need to have competitive advantage. You need to be more effective as an organization. But at the moment, this is less of a factor. The one that is a bigger factor is coming actually from the macro situation, and that's the pressure on the public market, especially for smaller micro cap, small cap company at the bottom of the market, where if the pendulum shifts between fear and greed, it was very much at fear for a while, and it's slowly starting to shift back into greed. And I think as the opportunities to harvest a value in the really large cap companies start slowing down, people are going to move downward into the medium ones and eventually back into the small ones. We hope like before. So this is something, like I said, my CFO and I, we're really keeping an eye on our spend. We are putting foundations in place, like an S3 and an ATM and things that we might not use them immediately, but they're there when we want to take advantage of them when good things happen. And of course, we keep our fingers crossed for market recovery and some more liquidity at the bottom.
I love it. It's my sweet spot. I'm very, very familiar with what you're talking about here. That's public markets, that is. So let's talk about the best piece of advice you'd like to share with the audience or give your 30-year-old self.
I would say that if you think about a company like Cyngn, the way I would maybe define where we stand today, it's probably either misunderstood or unobserved yet, right? Because if you think about the huge addressable market, if you think about the amazing technology and the investment that was put into it, this is at the cusp of really reaching those recurring revenues, replacing the workers, augmenting workforces, increasing safety. Like all of these things are probably somewhere between 6 to 18 months away. And at that point, this is a complete different value of company, right? So if you look at a lot of these smaller companies that are under the radar, I think there's just diamonds in there if you're able to identify them. And the way I look at my investments is look at the team and look at the sector and look at the technology and look at differentiators. And a lot of these companies, they're vanilla, they're similar, but they're really diamonds out there. And I think Cyngn is one of them in that example, that it's probably at the cusp of being discovered and realizing its potential.
I love it. So you're saying when you invest, look at the entire big picture, not just one piece of it, and look forward to the opportunities that lie ahead. Is that the advice that you'd like to give with the audience?
Yeah, I think if you read the flows in all the Twitter and Twitch talk and all of that, a lot of investors today are technical, and it's an expertise on itself, and people are very successful with it. But I think you miss the fundamental analysis of a company if all you do is look at candlesticks. And some of these really have valuable potential in them, right? And this is an example of one, in my opinion, where I don't think the candles really tell the story of the potential impact this company has in the world.
So the advice would be look at the whole picture, look at the fundamentals, not just the technicals. Don't just make a decision based on some small narrow data set, some small narrow data set. Look at the holistic approach. Is that it? And look for the undervalued gems.
No, exactly. I think you put it accurately.
Lior, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. The stock symbol is CYN. They're making autonomous driving solutions that interact with commercial and industrial vehicles. I love the space, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Have a great day.